And I got somebody coming at 4:30, of course, but God,
that's all right. We'll be quick.
Okay. Luke. Oh, I'm going to do your, hey, at Luke Robinson.
No, LS Robinson 21.
Yeah, I got, and I are on
the YouTubes.
Our YouTube
channel.
YouTube live page. Cutting a
shit. Now you got to go.
Cutting a R-rated podcast.
There we go.
The R is for
really.
What? You got it. You got it. That's what we went with.
All right, you ready?
Okay. Yep.
We're already on. So, but I'm gonna still do the intro.
Oh yeah, feel free. Yeah.
Hey everybody, and welcome into Talking Tuscaloosa. Luke Robinson along with Jimmy Stein, as always. Jimmy, how are you and your Tandy 2000 today?
Well, we finally got it up and running. One of the mice died, but I did a little mouth to mouth with the little fella, and we got her up and running again.
Yeah, and he's not even talking about the mice in his computer.
No, I'm just talking about random mouse.
Random mice that came to his law office to get a divorce.
That's what people mean by hooking up with randoms, right?
Random animals.
Random mice.
So, Jimmy, we tried to do this last week, and we have now discovered that your computer was completely screwed up. It was totally your error.
It is totally my fault. It is totally my fault.
I'm going to be honest. The moment's kind of lost because we were going to do a podcast the day after the national championship. And
I was in I was probably in a mood or something. Heck, I'm still in a mood. Stupid work.
But
work mood.
Like I'm going to say the moment is lost, but I'm not sure it's lost because I'm still pretty euphoric.
Heck yeah. As a matter of fact, I've been angry quite a bit, which is strange considering we just won the championship. But I just think as a fan base, we don't celebrate our accomplishments enough. We complain about something stupid, or we move on to the next thing. Like we won the game, and 5 minutes later, it's, oh, but what about defensive line next year?
What are we going to do if Jalen transfers?
What if Jalen transfers? And it's just, can't we just celebrate at least for a day?
Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you a little bit, but I'm going to say that's what separates us. There are things every program has to sacrifice. Okay, Purdue sacrifices football for getting fantastic engineering jobs, and they sacrifice being really, really cool for making a shit ton of money and being cool later in life. You know what I mean? Like
I do know what you mean.
All right, at Alabama, we sacrifice having fun in the moment for unbridled success. At Auburn, they sacrifice consistency for having fun in the moment. Nobody has more fun on a stage when you can have fun than Auburn does.
Right.
At the same time, they don't have the consistency we have. They're sacrifices every program makes, and so that's part of it. This is our kick six moment. This was our kick six game. I have complained in the past, and I felt guilty for complaining that we don't celebrate what we've done enough, because we don't kill you with some kind of grandiose death. We strangle you like a really slow boa constrictor, and we just and then it's over, and you're like, holy cow, we bludgeoned them. I mean, that was sad, and it was over by the third quarter. This game though was our kick six because, and in a sense, it was better because it was for the national championship, and it was also, look, when the kick six happened, I could see that coming in a way. I thought it would be, we get the kick blocked and Auburn returned it. I didn't think he'd return it from the back of the end zone, but I could see something like that happening. in every other championship game scenario we've had, even the ones with Clemson that have come down to the last couple of seconds, those games still ended with a kneel down. Both of the Clemson games did. They ended with Jake Coker taking a knee, and last year with Deshaun Watson taking a knee after they recovered the onside kick, right?
Right.
Okay. Notre Dame was a blowout. LSU was a blowout. Texas ended up being a blowout. It was never really in a ton of doubt. Which one am I missing here? I mean, even though Ohio State, we knew that the playoff game, we knew that wasn't going to be completed. We knew Blake Sims wasn't going to throw a Hail Mary completion. That's just not what we do. So that's why this last game with Tua Tagovailoa throwing a 2nd and 26 conversion for a touchdown out of the blue after a sack, it made no sense. Freshman to freshman, lefty with a true freshman in there blocking for him, with throwing to a true freshman after he had just been sacked on the biggest stage of anybody's career, and then he throws a dart to another freshman in the end zone. It doesn't happen for Alabama that way. We do things other ways. We beat you into submission. And so that's what makes this game so incredible.
It does, and everything is incredible, and that incredibleness is what I want to celebrate, as opposed to a dissection of our offensive line depth chart next fall, which is fascinating. All that's fascinating. I'm doing it too. Heck, that's one thing I do. I set these rules and then I violate them myself. But I'm excited about next season. I'm excited about Tua. It just seems like Saban has Sabanized the fan base to the point of Nick famously wins the national championship, gets off that stage and starts calling recruits. I think as fans, we do that. Now as fans, we do that. And that's not necessarily our role. Obviously Nick is fired up about next season. That's a Nick thing. He's going to be hiring the staff and recruiting and everything else. But I'm just saying, I would like to do a little more smelling of the roses as a fan base, not as a program, but as a fan base, and less complaining / worrying about next year, which is so far away. But nevertheless,
that's not the society we live in, though. And Jimmy, you know this as well as anybody. Jerry Seinfeld said it in the 90s that men don't care what's on TV. We only care what else is on TV.
What else is on TV? Yeah.
And that's how people are. Nobody celebrates. Alabama had the confetti hadn't even thought about being swept off the floor of the Mercedes Dome when there were already 4 articles about, okay, here's your top 10 for next year.
Yeah, it's just so, which is so ridiculous, because at that point nobody knew what juniors were coming out and what weren't. Which weren't. So because juniors coming and staying are the single most biggest determinative factor, in the whole idea of where you're going to rank teams for next fall. I mean, you need to know what the juniors are doing. So any of those preseason polls prior to yesterday, which was the junior deadline, is just absolutely silly. But we do have a ton to talk about. I do want to talk about next season. Not like, hey, let's just do this whole show recapping what happened against Georgia. I mean, I do want to talk about next year. I do want to talk about recruiting. I'm just saying, as a whole, we need to appreciate more the moment. This isn't going to last forever. I don't know how much longer this will last.
We keep saying that, and it keeps happening.
It keeps happening again. And next year, and here I am again, already talking about next year. I think next year, Luke, when you look at our schedule, has nothing to do with how good Alabama is. But I've gotten opinions today from several people about next year's schedule, and the consensus seems to be the toughest game that we play next year is either Auburn or at LSU. Those seem to be the toughest games on the surface. And both of those teams, to me, Luke, look like 8-4 teams, maybe 9-3, maybe. I think both Auburn and LSU are more likely to be 7-5 than 9-3 personally. But I'm just saying those are the toughest games on our schedule. So, most of it's just the league is in transition because of all the brand new hires. Just means it's sort of a transitional year in the league. But I'll tell you who's not transitioning, and that's Alabama, who looks more dangerous than ever because the defense is good, period. But next year, Alabama's offense looks like it could be historically good. So I definitely think we could go ahead right now, Luke, and say Alabama will be in the mix. It's too early for me to get on board with the idea that it's just a coronation and next January is going to be number 18. But between what Alabama returns on offense and the schedule, I like Alabama cruising into Atlanta 12-0, in the next December.
I agree with you, and I'm going to take it a step further and be rather cocky here. I think the toughest game on the schedule is going to be whoever we play in the Georgia Dome. Or not?
Yeah, well, I was talking about and I was obviously talking about the regular season.
I know.
I was referring to regular season only. I agree. Whoever we play in Atlanta will be better than Auburn or LSU, whether that's revamped Georgia, whether it's a South Carolina team that I'm going to be very high on during this entire offseason. And frankly, I think Dan Mullen is going to improve Florida overnight in the sense that Florida will be coached at an expert level. Period. If Dan Mullen could find 9 and 10 wins out of those Mississippi State teams playing in the West, I think Florida is going to win quite a few games, even next fall. Jeremy Pruitt has a more total rebuild job at Tennessee, and we know Kentucky, Missouri, and Vanderbilt are not contenders to actually win the East next season, although Missouri will score a lot of points.
Tennessee lost.
They lost some good players. Exactly, and they weren't the most gifted guys to be with. Missouri's going to score a lot of points because Drew Lock is very good, but of course they lost their offensive coordinator. So I think the East next year is Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. All three of those teams, in my opinion, maybe you differ from me, I'll take all three of those teams over a second place West team. In other words, I think Georgia, Florida, South Carolina today, I would say, are going to be better, or at least every bit as good as Auburn and LSU.
I'm going to I want to side with you because I dislike Auburn so much, but I'm at the same time Auburn just surprises me. I think what's going to happen is Auburn's probably going to get a lot of press coming into this season, and then they're going to disappoint. I think they're setting themselves up for a fail, so I will agree with you.
I got to look at their lineup, and you might know their lineup better than me, but who's going to be the back?
Well, the back right now, I mean, I guess it's either going to be Malik Miller or it's not going to be Cam Martin, but they don't trust him enough, apparently, that if they didn't put him in so many occasions this year, there's no way starting next year. I assume it's because of pass blocking.
And Ryan Davis will be back at wide receiver, and he's good.
All their receivers are back.
Okay, but who other than Ryan Davis is really good? I mean, I'm asking.
Nate Craig Myers comes in with a lot. Nate Craig Myers is their Robert Foster.
I agree. He was sort of a 5-star that hasn't done much so far. Ryan Davis is really good.
Darius Slade.
The tight end / the fullback is a good player, isn't he? Back
Is it Darius Slayton or Slade?
Slayton. Yeah. He's a good player. And the Hastings kid is probably back, right?
The Hastings kid is he's a poor man.
Poor man's Renfro.
Yeah, poor man's Renfro.
Poor man's Hunter Renfro. Chandler Cox, he's probably back, right?
I think he's gone. Pretty sure he's gone.
Well, he's not a difference maker anyway. He's a utility guy, right?
No, but he is. I'll tell you what he is.
He's good at what he is.
He's Heath Evans.
Well, Heath Evans played running back in the NFL and was productive.
Yeah, he's a rah-rah kind of guy too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, to me, he's a blue-collar, do everything fullback, but I don't anticipate the headline, Auburn behind Chandler Cox beats LSU 29-7.
No, I get what you're saying there.
And on the offensive line, Braden Smith was a complete badass, but he's gone.
They lose 4 of their offensive line starters, I think, or at least got 4 guys who did start during the year. Their offensive line is going to be a work in progress, and they also lost their offensive line coach today. So
that's right. So no line, no back. It's all on Stidham throwing passes for Ryan Davis and Nate Craig Myers and Chandler Cox being a pretty good fullback.
Chandler Cox is gone. I just told you.
Oh, yeah, you just said that. So they don't even have that. So what I'm saying is, how's Auburn going to win 10 games with that crew?
Well, and also they've got Washington. They've got but I'll tell you how they're going to win because I'm not so damn sure the SEC is going to be a whole hell of a lot better.
Oh, that's true. Hey, and I'm big on Stidham. Stidham's a dude, man. He's good.
But I think they could lose if they go 9-3. Okay, I would consider that season a failure given the rest of their schedule. They've got a 3-game schedule. And we might have a 1-game schedule.
Hey, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about this all summer because I find the game fascinating, and maybe I'm going to be so wrong, and I am the king of underestimating Auburn. But I like Washington to beat them in that opener. I'll take the Huskies right now.
Washington's running back's coming back. He announced he's coming back.
Myles Gaskin.
Yeah, and so is Bryce Love for Stanford.
Jake Browning is back too, isn't he?
Yeah.
They'll beat Auburn. Yeah, they'll beat Auburn. And okay, so that's 0-1. And they play Georgia out of the East every year. That's a second
They're
loss.
at Georgia and at Bama. I think they lose both those. I think they're 9-3.
That's so they're 9-3. That's if they beat everybody else in the West. I'm telling you, dude, that I'll say 8-4, but I like doing this about predictions. I'm the only person that likes to do it. Some people say I'm hedging bets, but it's actually a great look at how optimistic or pessimistic I am on a team. I like picking what I think it's going to be and then say, okay, if I'm wrong, it's this direction or that direction. And by that, I'm saying I'm going to predict Auburn's 8-4, but 7-5 is more likely than 9-3.
Okay, I'm going to say 9-3 is more likely than 8-4, but I think 9-3 is where it's at. I can't see this team. Georgia lost a lot, but I can't see them beating Georgia on the road. I can't see them beating Alabama on the road. And I think Washington's going to win that game. If they beat Washington now, I think they probably go to Athens undefeated.
I'll tell you who else is pretty good. I don't predict. Yes, they're not going to win 10. I don't think they'll go 10-2, but they are not going to be an easy out. And let me tell you what I think that Moorhead, this is a long-term prediction, and this could end up being so wrong. It's crazy because it's such a long-term. I think Moorhead and Mississippi State will have a really good year this year, and each year it'll get a little worse.
No, I agree. He's going to be like a poor man's Larry Coker. We have a lot of poor men on this thing, including you and me.
Including the two of us. That starts the whole list.
And I think, doesn't Auburn go to Mississippi State next year? I think they do. That could be tricky.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they returned something like 18 starters.
And
including Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something else. Look, I don't think they're going to be great, and they have nothing to play for, but Ole Miss isn't going to be the easiest out in the world. They're not going to be like a probation-laden Ole Miss that we thought they were going to be. They still, if some of those guys stick around like Antonio Brown and DK Metcalf, and they have that other Hawaiian quarterback, they're going to be pretty strong. Benito Jones, they're not going to be bad.
No, I see
they're going to be bad, but they're not going to be as bad as you think.
Right. They'll be like a 4-8 team, but you better show up and play.
Pack a lunch.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. They're not horrid, but they don't have enough to win a lot of SEC games. I think Alabama will be the clearest favorite I can remember in terms of winning the SEC, but the game in Atlanta will be tough, especially if Alabama just cruises through September, October, November, and they haven't really been challenged. When they do get challenged, you just wonder as a team how they're going to respond to that. And unfortunately, when Alabama does get challenged, it's likely to be on a very big stage, like Atlanta, like in the playoffs. So I can see whoever wins the East, whether it's Georgia, whether it's South Carolina, whether it's Florida under Dan Mullen, that's going to be a pretty good football team. Maybe not a monster, but good enough to beat anyone.
Well, let me say this too. I want to throw some other things out there you may not have known. I mean, these are going to be random thoughts because we're going to have all summer to talk about who's going to be in the playoffs next year. I think you and I would probably both put Clemson and Alabama in there again. But after that, it could get a little tricky. But I will talk about that all through the rest of the all season. Nobody's talked about this, and I just happened to write this down randomly. Alabama has now beaten LSU for a national championship in Louisiana and Georgia for a national championship in Georgia. That's pretty damned unbelievable.
It's good. People just are. I mean, it's crazy that we win 5 times in 9 years, and I still don't think we get enough credit. And that's a perfect example. We're doing stuff that no one has ever done before consistently, while half the country goes, whatever.
Or like, you hadn't played anybody. You didn't do. I'm like, nobody else has done this ever.
We're going to hear it again next fall. And to some extent, it'll be true in the sense that I do think it's one of our lighter schedules. But I refuse to believe, I do know a little bit about football. I refuse to believe, Luke, that winning the SEC is easy. It is only going to look easy because this is Nick Saban's Alabama. That's why it looks easy, but it's not easy, and it won't even be easy next year. If Clemson was in the SEC, would they win it? Probably. Are they going to win every week 48-3? Hell no.
No, I agree with you. But Clemson, by the way, bringing back all their defensive lines, pretty sick. But a guy that's coming back for Alabama is Damian Harris.
Shocking.
And it is a little shocking, but you know what? It's not a trend necessarily because a lot of running backs did. But I mean, Myles Gaskin did, and Bryce Love for Stanford is, and Damian Harris is. And here's the thing about it, Damian Harris. Okay, he's got almost 2,200 career rushing yards. it's not crazy that he ends up being Alabama's all-time leading rusher if he's the guy. Now, I don't think he's going to get enough carries to do that.
Right.
With Najee Harris, with Josh Jacobs, with Brian Robinson. Let's say Slade Bolden gets in there and does some things. Let's say Jerome Ford gets in there and does some things. I mean, let's say that, and you also got to think that somehow, some way, Jalen Hurts is going to get his carries. Jalen Hurts, by the way, has 1,809 career yards, and it's not out of the realm of possibility if he were the starter for the next 2 years that he would be the career leading rusher. In fact, I would probably put money that he would be if he were going to be the starter, but he's not going to be the starter.
I'll go ahead and say this now. It'll be an unpopular thing to say with fans, broadcasters, media, and a very unpopular thing for me to say out loud in the sense that Jalen Hurts listens to this, or Nick Saban or the coaches. So let's hope that this isn't one of those weeks where all the coaching staff tunes into our show. But I think if there is not a clear-cut signal as to who the number one quarterback is, everyone is going to freak the fudge out. And I don't mean fudge. Everyone is going to freak out when we go into spring and out of spring, dividing reps. Nick not saying who a clear-cut starter is, but people will freak out instead of using their heads and figuring out what Nick is trying to do. And what Nick is trying to do is keep both quarterbacks in Tuscaloosa this fall. That is the goal, not because he doesn't trust Tua to start. Oh, hell no. It's to keep Jalen Hurts around, because as much as people are frustrated with him, it's going to be very tough for you to find another second-team quarterback with 26 wins and playoff wins and an SEC championship win. And they want Jalen Hurts to be the number 2 quarterback, and you're probably not going to achieve that if you're saying things like in spring practice, well, we have a clear-cut starter in Tua, and we have no idea what reps Jalen's going to get at all. That is not what you say when the goal is to keep both kids around.
Yeah,
so I hope people figure that out instead of just freaking out and thinking that Nick Saban is some dumbass. Because that's what people will say. If Nick's not starting Tua, he's a dumbass. That's not the point. Read between the lines, people.
No, I agree with you. I think that's what'll happen too. But I find it unbelievable that we've got a couple of guys that legitimately could set records if we put our minds to it, but that's not going to be. I think there's no chance either one of them will set that record. But it's going to be funny that we could have next year, assuming Jalen Hurts stays and assuming Tua does things that I think Tua can do, we could legitimately have 2 SEC Offensive Player of the Years on the same roster at the same position.
That is nuts. I mean, only at Nick Saban's Alabama would that ever happen. But I agree with you that it's extremely possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's and here's something else. I think that that at halftime of the game, did you go to the game, by the way?
Do we have to talk about this?
No, you got snowed in, didn't you?
I got iced in. Yeah, I was at the.
Did you have a ticket and get iced in?
Yes.
Were you able to sell it?
Yes.
Okay. God, that sucks for you. Did you make money?
No, because I gave it to a friend.
Hey,
so I didn't want to.
You've got a buddy that you do a podcast with.
It was bad timing for my other friends that also wanted the ticket.
But
no, what happened?
I ended up going
it's a long story.
because I paid a shit ton of money for a ticket, but I'm glad I did. But it was 13-0 right at halftime, and I felt like, you and I had some behind the scenes talk. Like, would it be crazy if Saban left after this game? Would that be so crazy? And I was thinking, he might just be like, man, I'm too tired.
Yeah.
But
I was half expecting it, to be honest, half expecting it.
The youth movement of the second half, I swear to God, Jimmy, I think it re-energized it. I'm thinking instead of getting closer to retirement, this extended his career.
I think that it convinced him, look, this is the way I think about it. I don't know how Nick thinks. I mean, who the hell would know? And people want to ask Cecil and people like that, people that are closer to Nick. And I don't think they have any more insight than anyone else. But I know this from just human nature and knowing Nick as well as we can know him from a distance. What Nick doesn't want to do is stick around Alabama when the decline starts. I don't think Nick Saban ever wants to be a part of Alabama being 7-5 or 8-4 I think he would want to step away, not right after that happens, but before it happens, if that makes sense. I think he wants to go out either on top or the program being where it's always been under him. I think all the freshmen in the second half, the Tua revolution, Najee Harris, the freshman wideouts, I think all of that has convinced Nick that the end is not in sight, that Alabama, for at least the next 2 seasons, will continue to be super elite. So I don't think Nick is going anywhere as long as Alabama is super elite. I think when a crack starts to form or become evident to him, I anticipate him leaving before the crack leads to literally a, quote, bad season. If you remember Coach Bryant, in making these comparisons so silly, but Coach Bryant won the national title in 78 and 79, and then also coached Alabama in 80 and 81 that were good years because Alabama ended up in the Cotton Bowl. Back then was a pretty big deal both years, but Alabama did not win the SEC in 80 or 81. And then in his final year, 82, I think clearly the program had taken a step back then. Auburn at that point had beaten Alabama a couple of times, and they had Bo Jackson. And I'm just saying, I think Nick Saban, looking back at that Bryant era, would have said, you know, when a really good time to get out would have been 80, maybe 80, maybe 80, because that way there was no decline in 81 and 82. And he could have said, hey, I won 2 national titles and I'm retiring after this Cotton Bowl, which was a really big deal, you know. And what I'm saying is, I think Nick is going to retire in his 1980, a year or 2 before he senses a decline is coming. And I think exactly to prop up your point, which I think is dead on and a great point, I think these freshmen have convinced Nick that, look, there is no decline that's imminent. At least for the next 2 years, Alabama will be crazy elite like they have been, and there's no reason for him to go anywhere.
You know what? And I can live with that. If you told me, hey, wink, wink, Nick Saban is going to leave when Tua Tagovailoa leaves, whether that be his junior year or his senior year, I can say, man, all you can do is pat him on the back and say, man, thanks so much. I mean, if he left today, that's all you could do. But I mean, I could live with that. And hopefully by then there will be some shoe-in assistant that we will want to hire, because whoever comes in next.
There's no clear line of succession at all right now. I think that's an issue as well. I mean, the clear guy is Dabo. I mean, I think he has to get the first call, but there's absolutely no guarantee in the world he would take the job. As a matter of fact, most people believe he wouldn't. Not right now. So once you remove Dabo from the equation, now you ask 10 people who the next coach should be, you're going to get 10 different answers. So
that's right.
I mean, that's a thing. That's a thing too. I think Nick is going to want to leave Alabama in good hands, going forward. And I think, like most coaches, like Bob Stoops sort of punted to his guy Lincoln Riley, and Bear Bryant, punted to his guy Ray Perkins. I think Coach Saban is going to prefer that the person that succeeds him is someone, one of, quote, his guys. But on the other hand, Nick's driven. He's a winner. He wants the best for Alabama. And I bet his opinion might have been different a while back, but I'd bet today Nick would have no objection to Dabo Swinney being the next head coach at Alabama. But again, I don't think Dabo wants the job today. And thankfully, I don't think Nick's going anywhere. I put it this way, after seeing what you said, and it props up your point, it's exactly what you just said, Luke. I feel very sure that Nick Saban will be the head coach at Alabama for the next 2 seasons. I feel very sure of that.
Yeah, and I mean, that seems like such a short period, but that's a lot of winning to go in. I mean, we could literally have 30 wins.
He'll be 68 years old. We could. Nick will be 68 years old at the end of it. I mean, that's, and who knows? But he's the greatest coach of all time. I think he was before this championship, but I think this championship cemented the fact. In my mind, it's unquestionable, and we're people that grew up in the Bear Bryant program. But Nick Saban is the greatest head football coach in the history of college football. I think in terms of Nick's place in history now, we have to look at other sports. Where would Nick rank as one of the great coaches in all of the sports? because that's the only place to go now. And we'll see. I mean, I think there's another championship or two in this program because of players like Tua and Najee and what Alabama does on defense. And as much as we'll talk about that, Luke, over the next few months, the offseason, how about an incredible shout out to the other side of the ball where Alabama replaced 7 NFL defensive players and still finished with the #1 total defense in college football. That is astounding. It's astounding. I don't even know that it's possible. I remember a discussion on TI's board much earlier this summer, a bet that I should have made, but some guy, and I don't remember who it was, but some guy saying, oh, with losing 7 guys defensively, Alabama's not going to finish in the top 20. And I said, I think they're a shoe-in to finish in the top 10. And he thought that was nuts. And I wanted to bet him money, substantial money, would finish the top 15. But I wouldn't do that. But my point is, gosh, unbelievable. #1 after losing 7 defenders. And there will be a lot of question marks on the defensive side of the ball going into next season. We have to completely rebuild. The secondary will be Deontay Thompson plus 5 brand new guys. And the defensive line, which will feature 3 good starters, is going to have some significant depth issues. So, and a brand new defensive coordinator in Tosh Lupoy, who's never done the job before. So, lots of question marks on that side of the ball. But I'll tell you what, right now, they'll finish in the top 10 again. I'm not going to sit here and say they'll finish #1, but they could. They could. I'm not going to bet against it.
No, I'm right there with you. It's really the salad days, as some people like to call them. But let's do a real quick talk about the basketball team coming up.
Oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah, sure.
Auburn, Alabama basketball tomorrow. Listen. I think Auburn's going to win this game. I'm taking the crimson glasses off. I think Auburn is the best team in the SEC right now. I do not think they're the most talented. I do think they're the best team. They play, they hustle, they play like Bruce Pearl's vintage Tennessee teams. They get after your ass. They have great ball awareness and court awareness. They have good chemistry. There's not Bryce Brown, I guess, is the closest thing to a superstar to me. Mustafa Heron's been good. Not necessarily 5-star great, but Bryce Brown is the guy that if you said, okay, I can have one guy on my team, I'm taking Bryce Brown. But then Horace Spencer's gives you good minutes. Davion Mitchell's very good. I don't see how this young Alabama team is going to beat that squad. Auburn next year, when Alabama is going to be the Auburn of next year, I will feel better. We need this team to be more seasoned. And unfortunately, I don't see Alabama winning that game tomorrow. But Alabama still is in the mix for an NCAA berth. I'm less confident about it than I was, but somehow maybe this team can get its feet under them. Even the win against LSU Saturday felt more like an LSU loss than an Alabama win to me.
We'll see what happens tomorrow. I agree with everything you said about Auburn. Bruce Pearl is definitely at the 1/3 of the year mark in the league, the SEC Coach of the Year. And I dislike the guy intensely, so it's not easy for me to hand out platitudes. But he's the best, doing the best coaching job in this league as of right now. But I do think Alabama will win the game tomorrow night, solely over home court advantage. I will say this: as much as they're like, "What, you crazy? Alabama beating Auburn?" I'll say this: when we go to Auburn, we're probably going to get run out of the building and lose by 20. That wouldn't shock me either. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I do think Alabama will win the game tomorrow night because it's a home game, and I think Auburn's due. I think both of these teams are due for a little market correction. I think Alabama's better in their record. I think Auburn's worse than their record. The two are meeting on an Alabama home court. It's just time for market correction for both, and that's why I think Alabama will win. And I do think Alabama is likely to make the NCAA tournament, but they have put themselves in a position where every game is big and they can't afford a bad loss, and they can't afford to give up games on our home court. Even when you're playing a team with a really high RPI like an Auburn or an Oklahoma, those games have sort of turned into must wins if Alabama would like to play in the NCAA tournament. But I like Alabama to win tomorrow night in a really close game behind superhuman performances by Sexton and Ingram and Petty.
Yeah, Sexton's really going to have to go off, but somebody's going to have to help him. Somebody, I mean,
Oh,
Petty,
no, we can't do it.
and you know, Petty is the kind of guy who gets charged up by the crowd. I'm hoping beyond hope that the weather does not keep people away, but it could. That's very scary to me. So, Jimmy, now that we have your computer fixed, we can do this podcast again next week, thankfully. I know
let's go over recruiting big time next week. We'll do like a whole recruiting show next week.
Yeah, we'll do. That's all we're doing next week is recruiting. So y'all hang tight with us. Jimmy has to go. We spent the first 30 minutes fixing his computer with his secretary, who is not his IT person, just somebody who knows more about electronics than Jimmy, i.e. anybody.
She's not an IT, but she is the it girl.
Oh, that's not. Is she there listening? That's so cool of you.
Probably hear me through the vents. She can probably hear me through the vents.
And then she has heard some really bad stuff in the past.
She's heard a lot of bad legal advice.
All right, man. Roll Tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.
All right, buddy. See you.
See you.